out in the mountain areas, of the wooded areas, deep in, how many people go on into those places? I hate to say it, there's a lot of areas where humans haven't even walked. So, maybe that's where they are. And, maybe some of them have run across, humans, and they're inquisitive about us, just like we are with them. Or, again, maybe there's something totally else. Maybe there's something, that, it goes bang and boom in the night. We don't know what it is.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
But my friend, like I said, he's been on my show a couple of times about, Bigfoot. Actually, again, the reports where they actually have come very close to, like, there's a tavern. Now, this is out a long ways away from anything, it's out in the forest area. But there's a tavern and there's a gas station in that area. And then there's a campground also. But there's been sightings of Bigfoot even coming there late at night, going through the garbage.
Yeah, I have in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, I have a report of a creature. And this is, Gettysburg's kind of a tourist town. It's surrounded by woods and forests and farmland and so forth. But this was in town. And the witness was, very, very serious and very forthright, and said that they saw it digging through the dumpster of a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant.
Wow. Yeah, well, so much for Kentucky Fried Chicken. But, I mean, maybe they're used to human food, too. I mean, I'm sure they have gone into campgrounds and stole food, because there's certainly been a lot of reports on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, do you have anything more you want to read? Any more articles that you can, let our listeners know? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. So let's take one from your neck of the woods. And this is one of my favorite ones. There was a creature was seen around in the early 1900s, so in the 19-teens, so around like 1912 to 1915, 1916, in Seattle, or right around Seattle, at the University of Washington. And they called this Bosco. And the reason they called this guy Bosco, again, they didn't use Bigfoot at the time. There was a circus wild man that had been through the area recently, and he went by the name of Bosco. So when they saw this Bigfoot creature, they started calling him Bosco. And this is because it was seen near the university. They called him Bughouse Bosco, the varsity wild man. And it says he makes lunches of dogs and bites off trees. Bughouse Bosco, the bushman, the terror of the university district, is still at large today, despite a determined search by the police yesterday. Bosco is the man who leaped upon an Italian workman on Mount Lake Boulevard within 100 yards of the university canoe house on Lake Washington yesterday morning. Not content with choking his victim with his claws, he threw a heavy piece of iron at him and nearly caved in the workman's ribs. After that, he fled into the brush again. The Italian described him as a wild-eyed giant, clad much like Robinson Crusoe before he learned the art of tailoring. He says Bosco has long, matted hair forming a thatch on his head, an evil face almost hidden by a tangled growth of black beard, through which long yellow tusks protrude. The workman would not go near the spot yesterday afternoon, but stood across the roadway and pointed. When it became necessary to designate its exact spots, he threw stones, but he would not approach the thicket from whence the wild man had sprung on him. Just at the edge of the thicket is a little plot of sand, and here marks the bare feet plainly visible. It was at this point that the scuffle occurred. The foreman for the independent asphalt company, who declined to give his name, said that during his examination of the thicket shortly after the assault, he found several alder trees averaging 6 inches in diameter lying across the path, with evidence that they had been bitten down by Bosco to delay pursuers. Motorcycle patrolman J.A. Thomas, with a member of the mounted squad, found evidence that Bosco had employed a large log to kill what appeared to have been a yellow dog near the lake shore about 200 miles south of the boathouse. Yellow hair lay here and there, a few crunch bones, but no flesh. Thomas believes the wild man ate the dog. The log, measuring 2 feet in diameter, was broken in the middle. Evidence that a dog was following him was brought out in an interview with Mrs. Jack Ayrton, who lives near the boathouse, and who was the only one who witnessed the encounter. A few minutes after the Italian had been attacked, she declared she saw a form slink out to the water's edge and then dart back in again. A yellow dog with dirty hair followed it. Mrs. Erlin was walking along the railroad track with a pail of water when the wild man attacked his victims. She saw him dig his talons into the man's throat, saw the Italian fight for breath, and heard him finally shriek for help. The wild man then fled. Last night, when Frank Swaps, a fireman at the University Powerhouse, which is just across the tracks from the thicket, went down to adjust the electric pump near the boathouse, he was startled by a weird, unearthly cry, which seemed to have come from the lake grass in the swamp at the head of the bay. Swaps doesn't believe in ghosts, and after the moment, he shrugged his shoulders and went inside. But when he came out in a few moments, he was just in time to see the wild man trot noiselessly down the railroad bank from the direction of the swamp and plunge into the lake, not 50 feet from where he stood in the shadows. Swaps waited patiently, and soon Bosco emerged and squatted on the bank. He seemed to be nibbling. Creeping closer to investigate, Swaps encountered a twig which snapped. The wild man fled. Swaps found a half-eaten fish. Night before last, the wild man peered into the engine room door of the powerhouse about 10:30. Engineer William Auckland attempted to coax him inside, but he became suspicious and went away. Auckland chased him to the tracks, but lost him in the darkness. Bursar Herbert T. Condon of the university has been greatly puzzled by the past few days by the discovery of huge footprints in the asphalt walks of the campus, impressed there before the asphalt hardened from the heat of the day. Last night he declared he believed them the footprints of Bosco. And that creature went on to be seen several times. It attacked a girl at the university who she must have been very brave. She beat it off with her purse. It said beat him down, well, not down, but away. Beat him with her purse till he went away. And they were forming, the football team. They said was forming posses to hunt him, and they, to my knowledge, they never got him. But very, very interesting. Multiple people saw him, and I'm very curious about the footprints in the asphalt. I wonder how long they were there. That they report.
Yeah, and what year was that?
That was 1914, but the reports kind of start before then. I think they start around 1912 or so, and they go on to 1916 or so. So they were seeing them for quite a few years there.
Well, you have to understand, in that area of Seattle was a lot of forest yet, a lot. And people don't realize that. They think, oh, Seattle is huge. Back then, it really wasn't. Because I grew up in Seattle. And it's funny. Here we lived in a residential area. And next to us was about what was left of a little farm for a few years before, it got bulldozed and the houses built. It just lets you know how, going back, like in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1900s, like around Lake Union, it was all forest. So, yeah, I really believe there could be something out there at that point.
Yeah, I mean, those were some neat encounters. I have one from, let's see, here's one from the Oakland Tribune, but that was where it was reported. This is from 1920. And this is a pretty scary account of one that came into someone's house. Burglar looks like a huge ape. Los Angeles, June 5th. The shaggy orangutan imposed murderers in the rue morgue could have been no more horrifying in appearance than the man or beast who at 3 o'clock on a recent morning invaded the bedroom of 2 small girls in Long Beach. The tiny daughters of H.H. Thompson were asleep in their room in the Thompson home at 3109 Courteau Place. When they were awakened by a man in the room, they screamed and huddled under the bedclothes in fear. Thompson, the father, heard the screams and rushed into the room just in time to see the most gorilla-like man he'd ever seen climbing out of the window. Before the girl's father could reach the window, the man had dropped to the ground and escaped. Thompson says the man's head and face were so covered with long, black, shaggy hair that, along with his immense size and ferocious stoop, he in every way resembled a large ape. The father arrived before anything had been stolen. The Long Beach police are hunting for the man, or the man of ape-like description, but so far without success.
That is scary. It's a lot of reports around, even the cities and all that stuff. Again, people just, you look at the city now, you go back to those days, it was a lot of forest around all those areas. I mean, immense forest. So, when you were even talking about the Seattle, the only place I can think about, that was around the Lake Union area, near the UW where the college was. And that was used for many years as a coal fire plant, power plant. And, it was all woods there in that time frame, all around there.
Wow. See, that's a little bit of the history I didn't know.
Yeah. Well,
I figured it had to be less built up than it is today, but I wasn't sure.
Well, yes, especially around like University of Washington, you go back around there, and it was a lot of undeveloped areas of nothing. So yeah.
So here's one where a woman was abducted by the creature supposedly, and was found later. She was insane. So this is from the Philadelphia Times, 1890, April 25th. The wild man, whom several parties have attempted to capture, was encountered in Lee Vining Creek Canyon last week by John Forsey. The man was clad from head to foot in coyote skins and wore round Indian snowshoes. Though apparently quite aged, his hair and beard were white. He was as agile as a deer and climbed the steep side of the canyon with incredible swiftness, giving vent occasionally to cries of fear. It is some years since we heard of this wild creature being seen, but he is doubtless the same who terrorized tourists in the early part of the present decade, when he distinguished himself by snatching a young lady from a mule in the presence of her companions and disappearing in the thick timber at the southwest base of Mount Dana. Evincing Herculean strength and wonderful agility, she was found by a search party next day in a half-demented condition, unable to give lucid account of her experience, but no trace of her abductor could be discovered. So the other thing I find in these old wild man reports, a lot of times they'll say they were wearing animal skins, and I think this is just maybe a way of saying they were covered in hair. I'm not sure that, people were expecting to see a man covered in hair, and this is 1890. The mountain gorilla had been discovered, but most people hadn't seen it. So I think when they see these hair-covered things, a lot of times they think, oh, they're wearing furs, they're wearing hairs. So I think that's what explains that. But certainly the agility they mentioned, how quick it was and how strong it was, to me sort of says it was something more than a natural human.
Well, yeah, even after World War I, there was some, when I grew up as a kid, I'm now 67, but I remember when I was a young kid, there was a guy who lived in Seattle, West Seattle, that had an old house, and he was basically shell-shocked from World War I, and he did not believe in, like, electricity. He didn't have any water going to his house. He had his own well till the city condemned his property. But yeah, he was really, you see him, the way he dressed. I mean, he probably never even took a bath. He probably didn't have a haircut in years. And, I could see somebody like that running around, that after a war that, is not all there, that runs out in the woods. That could, maybe account for a very, very, very small amount. Again, don't forget Vietnam, we had that era too, where, maybe some of the vets that were, suffering mental problems from the war went out into the woods and, lived, could be mistaken as a Bigfoot or stuff like that. But, I mean, there's just so many strange things that happen, the reports, and too many people have seen, not so much seen, but, the smells or the rock tossing or the sounds and stuff like that. And I'm going back again to Ron Moorhead. I mean, I heard a lot of those sounds that he's recorded for the years. And I tell you, they're not done by coyotes. They're not done by anything I know of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's, I think they've been tested, and they're both lower and higher than the human voice can reach. So it's something, very, very bizarre that's making those noises, for sure.
Well, I don't know. And now, have you been out in the Bigfoot hunts? Do you ever plan to do one or anything?
Yeah, like I said, we have, several what we call kind of areas of interest here that we frequent, where people have, reported different things. I've gone out, I like to go out with witnesses and go to the location, if they're willing to take me to where they saw it, I will go with them. And even if it's been years, I've met people who, saw one 20 or 30 years ago then I'm still interested. I want to see where they saw it and hear their story. And